Hello, I'm Shael Moog, Developer Advocate at Lightrun, and today we'll talk about the basics of debugging, specifically conditional breakpoints and set value. The main goal in this series is to bring you up to speed so we can dig into the real interesting tutorials near the end. The first part might seem a bit trivial since I'm assuming zero knowledge of debugging techniques, but I plan to get in depth with these videos as we move forward. But you might be asking yourself, why even go through this? Why do we need to go through a debugging tutorial? I already know programming, and using a debugger isn't exactly rocket science. Well, we spend 50% of our time chasing bugs according to some studies, such as the one listed down here. Although I saw numbers ranging from 25% to 75%. Unfortunately, this is a skill that universities don't really teach. Even at our job, people gloss over this essential skill. There are books that cover the subject, but a lot are out of date and aim at more complex scenarios. Debugging isn't just about finding bugs. When I need to implement a new feature in an area of the code I'm unfamiliar with, I will often pull up the debugger and start debugging those areas, trying to look at the flow as if I'm debugging an issue, inspecting the stack, members, etc., to gain a better understanding of the way the system works and validate my assumption. So this is a remarkably important skill we all need to hone. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover the JetBrains IDEs, which include IntelliJ IDEA, PyCharm, and WebStorm. I'm also going to cover Visual Studio Code, also known as VSCode. I will also demonstrate debugging Java code as well as Kotlin code. I will show the process of debugging JavaScript code with focus on NodeJS. And finally, Python code as well. Missing from this list are many important languages, like TypeScript, Scala, etc. Debugging TypeScript is very similar to JavaScript debugging, so the process should be practically identical. Scala and other JVM languages should be very similar to Java and Kotlin. So you will see from this tutorial, debugging using very different languages and tools is a very familiar process all around. Let's start with IntelliJ IDEA and the Java version of a prime finder application. You can find the link to the blog post containing all of the source code links in the video description. We run the project in the debugger by pressing the IDE debug button up on the top right. I then scroll down through the code to find the interesting point where I want to set a breakpoint. You can also right-click the file and select Run Debug in the context menu like I did here. In the Kotlin project, this works the same for WebStorm with JavaScript and PyCharm with Python, so I'll skip showing them. But VSCode is a bit different. For VSCode with NodeJS, I click the debug workspace and select the Run and Debug button. When prompted for the environment to use, I picked NodeJS. This is just as easy, only a slightly different process. So let's go back to the Java code and see how that breakpoint turns out. I place the breakpoint by clicking the gutter area on the left of the editor. Execution stops on that line. On the bottom left, you can see the stack trace. These are the methods that invoke the code we hit. The top method in the stack trace is the method where we put the breakpoint. On the right, you can see the variables in the stack frame and their values. At this point, we can inspect them to see if they match our expectations, but we can do a lot more. But before we do that, let's see how this looks in other IDEs. In VS Code, everything is practically identical, but there are some minor differences. The breakpoint is slightly to the left. The stack trace is at the left sidebar on the bottom, and the variables are on the top left. But overall, everything is very much the same conceptually. Kotlin is practically identical to the Java version, as you can see here. JavaScript on WebStorm is a very familiar JetBrains experience. Again, it all looks practically identical to the Java debugger. And last but not least, Python on PyCharm is again practically identical to the other IDEs in this regard. So let's proceed. You can use setValue to change the value of a variable dynamically to any arbitrary value that lets you test assumptions about the code. You're inspecting instantly without the stop/debug cycle. One cool IntelliJ feature that I didn't see in VS Code is the ability to view variables as hexadecimal or binary values. This is a pretty helpful feature for some use cases, and I found myself using that a lot. setValue works pretty much the same in VS Code, albeit with a slightly different UI. Other IDs look like IntelliJ, so there's no point in showing all of that. We can add an arbitrary Java expression as the condition for breakpoint execution. We do that in JetBrains IDEs by right-clicking the breakpoint and entering the condition. In this case, I just let the first array test the first array value. You can invoke methods as part of these conditions and do pretty elaborate stuff. In Kotlin, Python, and JavaScript, the condition is much simpler. I can check that num is an even or odd number in this line. All the numbers will be odd, so the former will never be hit and the latter will always be hit. We can do the same in VS Code. Notice that here we need to pick an edit option in the context menu, and only then can we type in the condition. While this code is technically JavaScript code and not Kotlin code, notice it's practically the same. To summarize, in this first installment of this series, I tried to stress the importance of debugging skills for our daily work. Great developers use their tools effectively and efficiently to increase productivity, and the debugger is a complex machine we need to wield effectively. According to some statistics, debugging might be as important as our coding skills. Unfortunately, even basic features like conditional breakpoints, setValue, etc. are rarely used by most developers. I hope this and future posts in this series will help change that for you and help you find bugs quickly. Thanks for bearing with me, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe and follow me on Twitter, Hashnode, etc. for more tutorials like this. In future videos, I will discuss these things more in depth. Thank you.